Today we've got Gus Rogers on the show. Gus is a Tang Soo practitioner from South Wales. Been sort of teaching his clubs for sort of 10 years plus, and just took the big step of becoming a full-time instructor earlier on in the year. So we're really keen to talk to Gus. It's the first time we've had a Tang Soo practitioner on the show. So certainly myself and Jackson being long life Taekwondo practitioners, we're super keen to understand a little bit about the differences between Tang Soo and Taekwondo. But before we start, hello and thanks for coming on the show, Gus.
Thank you so much for having me on, boys. It's really good to be on the show.
Can you give us a little bit about your background, where you grew up, and basically how you got into martial arts?
So I've always lived around South Wales, grew up in Bryn Mawr, and when I was a kid, my dad was a big film guy, watched films all the time, and would watch Bruce Lee and Jackie Chan and Sonny Chiba and all these films, and I just I think the Karate Kid craze of the early 80s was there. And I just wanted to do martial arts like more than anything. So I think we just moved to Bryn Mawr when I was about 5 or 6. And I went to a club. Now, I don't want to disparage this club at all because I was so young and I can't remember what style it was. But it was, if you could imagine the Cobra Kai scenario where the new kid went in and the bigger boys just went, right, fight that little kid over there. I went to
Fear does not exist in this dojo, does it?
Yeah, I think because I'd seen the film as well at such a young age, I just thought that's what martial arts was. Because again, I think up until the Karate Kid, you'd always seen like Bruce Lee and Jackie Chan were already trained, so you hadn't really seen a character in a movie that didn't know how to fight. So I did feel like Daniel LaRusso, especially at 6 years old, being so small. I remember not learning anything. Getting fought. It probably wasn't as bad as my memory was, but I went to 3 lessons, and I really had in my head that unless you found a Mr. Miyagi, your own personal teacher, it was going to be this awful experience that you had to get through. And I just think at 6 years old, I wasn't ready for it at all. So I just gave up with martial arts and sports in general. Later on, I was diagnosed with dyspraxia, which meant that I was naturally clumsy, couldn't catch a ball, and didn't really do well in sports. So when we moved from the next town over, Bryn Mawr to Blaenavon, my brother, who's 5 years younger than me, same thing, 6 or 7, wanted to get into martial arts. He went to the local club in Blaenavon. And of course, the same thing as you go, you don't know these styles, happened to be a Tang Soo school. And my brother started going, and about after 3 or 4 months after he was going, I was noticing 2 things. I was noticing that he was beating me up, which obviously I didn't like being his older brother. And secondly, my mum was saying that this martial art club isn't like the one you went to. It's very different. You need to go to 1 lesson. So I think at that time I was a little bit older. I was sort of 12, 13, and I was sort of that cynical teenager age. And I sort of went there and went, oh, this would be rubbish. And I wanted to disparage everything in the club. And I watched 1 lesson, and then I was still reluctant, I remember. But then I went to this first lesson. After the first lesson, I fell in love with it. I was just like, this is what I wanted. And it was all down to, again, you guys have talked many times on your podcast, it's not about the martial art at all. It's about the instructor. My instructor's name was Chris Long. He was a second dan in Tang Soo. He had a relatively new club. He had a very full club, but he had a new club. He didn't have any black belts. His highest grade was a red belt, which I think is equivalent to sort of blue, brown in Taekwondo. And everyone in the club was super friendly. There were lots of families training with each other, and it was his natural atmosphere. And me and my brother loved it. I just remember it being so hard and so difficult. But I remember I would go to class, we'd train twice a week for 2 hours. I'd get home and I'd want to practice everything. I want to practice all the kicks. I'd want to practice all the forms. And I just, for the first time in my life, I felt like this mantra that I've kept my entire life of, look, if I really work hard at something, I will get better at it. I just need to focus all my energy and time to it. And again, like a lot of boys, I was a sort of boy, if I wasn't interested in something, I wouldn't put any energy into it. So this was like a great metaphor for the rest of my life, going like, look, if I suck at something, if I'm bad at something, I need to imagine it's like Tang Soo or what I love. And then I'll work at it. I'll work really hard. And even though it was difficult for me having the dyspraxia, I found that even though it took me longer to learn it, if I was really patient and went with myself, that after a time, it would get there and stick. And I found that all the skills that I learned really, really stuck with me. And talking earlier about Tang Soo being not as well-known art, and you say you're not going to look for the art. I mean, one of the things that obviously you must love from Taekwondo is the kicking sort of side of it and the sort of spectacle of it. I find the sort of jump spinning kicks some of the hardest things to do. And when you master one of those skills, like one of those sort of 360 spinning kicks, it's a real sense of achievement. And later on in life, I found out that all the films, going back to the film thing of the films I'd watched as a child, No Retreat, No Surrender, and Karate Kid, and sort of Game of Death with Bruce Lee, they all had this Tang Soo thing. At the start of No Retreat, No Surrender, they were at a Tang Soo school. I don't know if you know that. And in the guy doing the martial arts for Bruce Lee stunt double in Game of Death, he was a Tang Soo guy. And then obviously, as you probably know, Chuck Norris, Tang Soo. So I realized that all the kicking stuff I'd seen as a kid that I wanted to emulate was in Tang Soo. Just luck of the draw. But I didn't find out any of those facts till many, many, many years later, like very recently.
You pick up on that. You pick it up because you like the physical bit and the kicking, the punching, the sparring, competition side. And I think when you get a little bit maturer, you actually start getting into the history of your art. You know, I spent a lot of time reading some of the Taekwondo books, but also other martial arts books to really understand the foundations of martial arts and where they come from. And you can track the history back hundreds of years, and you often find out there's intertwining paths from different personalities, mixing and hybriding different types of martial arts all the way along the different tracks that you get. So it's quite a good history lesson to delve back into the archives.
Yeah, I mean it's absolutely limitless. I have I say it's mine. It's my dad's line, but I thought you boys would appreciate it for all your martial art guys out there. He goes, he asked me one day. He says, "What's the definition of happiness?" And he says, "Oh, there's three types of happiness. There's short-term happiness. Short-term happiness is a night out, a nice meal, a roller coaster. You know, very intense but short-lived." He's like, "Well, what's mid-term happiness? Mid-term happiness is school, a relationship, a job. It's finite, but it will level out at some point. He's like, "What's long-term happiness?" He says, "Long-term happiness is a garden, right? It's really slow, but it will grow with you." And this is what we were talking about earlier before we went on about the lifetime investment. It's like you can do martial arts for all this time, and as well as the physical side of it, it has this infinite history and they're infinite martial arts. And Jesse Ankamp said it best, I thought, that we always start at the bottom of this huge mountain and we're trying to get to the top, right? We're trying to get to our black belt, our master belt. And he said, as you get up the mountain, you start to see other people going up this mountain with you, and you sort of wave at them and go, "Oh, look, there's a Taekwondo school, there's a Jiu-Jitsu school." And then he's like, when you get to the top of the mountain, you realize we were all climbing up the same mountain. But also now we can see all these other mountains to climb up. And I just think, for me, that is, if you're like, why get into martial arts? Why dedicate all this time to this one thing that again, on the outset, like I said, when I was 6, seems very violent and very, very sort of mean-spirited. And then again, when it's done properly, when it's a good instructor, when it's a good environment, is the most wholesome thing you can do. And again, like you said, the competition doesn't matter, because what you're offering them, look, you can do this for life. Like, there's so little in this day and age that you can say, look, it's a lifetime investment. You could do this forever. I absolutely love it.
We find it's about helping individuals develop life skills.
Transferable skills. That's
respect, the integrity. That's right. Yeah, things that you can learn as a young individual, a young adult, and you can take them to every facet of your life. And certainly in today's society, we often see a lot of that missing, particularly in schools where people know students or kids know their rights. You can't shout. It's very difficult to discipline them. Well, actually, in a martial arts school, yes, you can still discipline, but you have to change that discipline with current methodologies within society. So I think you can still have that extra layer of discipline, which actually parents, are quite keen for their children to have. And I think that's one of the key things that martial art brings to you.
I just wanted to quickly add to what you were saying about the transferable skills. Is like the martial arts thing. The way I formulate it is, again, white belt, not very difficult. Black belt, very difficult. If you look at it like that, it's this idea of like what builds character better than martial arts is you build confidence, then plus adversity, and then you just build their confidence more. But as you build their confidence more, you give them more adversity, and this builds character. And again, what we were talking about today in society, what builds character better than martial arts? I can't think of many things to help build those lessons.
Definitely not. So, how old were you when you picked up your first degree black belt then? And can you remember what that experience was like, walking in for that grading?
Yes. Again, I really became competitive with myself. I don't think I was competitive with other people there, but I always wanted to beat myself. I had this idea that I'll be better than next time. My mum was very kind to video all my grading. So I used to be the sort of student who'd grade, be happy with his grading, but then watch the grading back for the next 3 to 6 months to see if I could improve on any of the skills from last time. This is what I did. So when I went to my black belt grading, I'd never, because the colour belt gradings were all in the same place, but we had to drive up to Cambridge to grade. Now, luckily, I'd seen my instructor grade for his third Dan a year before I graded for my first Dan, so at least I'd seen it. I had seen what it was like. But I went there and I was like, it was 4 hours, and yeah, it was pretty tough. And I had to punch through a board, which I'd never done. And I found that really daunting at 18. Because I'd only broken boards before with my legs, which
was it a pine board, or was it a pine board, or was it like a plastic? Not the plastic pushed together ones that you get now.
No. It was a pine board that you had to have, and I think I don't know. There were a lot of these myths back then of like, yeah, to heat it up, or you made it damp, or to make it easier to break, or something. And whatever it was, I didn't break it, and my knuckle blew up. I tried to break it, and I didn't break. I broke the breeze block with the back fist, but I didn't break it with the board. So. Again, I just hadn't really practiced that much, which is why with my own club, I do use the plastic boards with the felt on it. So my students, every break-in, they practice like 100 times. I just think we were in a culture, even not even that long ago, but you just do it on the day, you'd be fine. Yeah. Don't worry about breaking. You'll do it on the day. And I'm like, I never understood that. I'm like, I tell my students, I go, no, we're going to practice breaking loads. You're gonna break that board easy on the day. Like, why would I do that to you? Why would I put you in that peril? Like,
just set you up to fail. It's almost setting someone up to fail, isn't it?
It is, yeah, totally.
And the thing is with breaking, if you're practicing the technique well enough on the pads, the board should be a piece of cake, really, shouldn't it?
But I didn't have pads when we were training back in the day. If my instructor brought in one pad, we were so excited because we never had pads. Like it's one of the things that I try and give my students. I go, look, guys, I'm going to give you, like, my martial arts experience was great, but there's so many things that I didn't have when I was training, and I just say to my students, look, I'm going to give you everything that I would have wanted when I was training. That's the one thing I always do for my students is I say, like, we're going to have shields, we're going to have paddles, we're going to have like foamer screamer sticks so you guys can hit each other hard. We're going to do everything. I mean, again, for the day, my instructor would be great, but it was like one of the things that, for example, like we grade, and you'd come into class the next day and my instructor would go, right, now you can go to a sports shop and buy your belt. That was my grading. And I was going, that seems so weird now because
really?
I get the belts from my students and I tie it around them and go, my instructor would just go, good job, go out to a sports shop and get your belt. Like, you can't even buy belts from a sports shop now. Like, it's such a different time.
In our club, my dad, he was a bit of a miser, a bit tight. He would say, look after the pennies type of man. And he would just take one belt off one person that had graded, then there you go, here's your new belt, tie that belt back onto someone else instead of buying new belts. Now, of course, students demand, I like to keep my standards high. I know most of us are the same. You grade, you belt, and we've got students now, they buy a belt rack, they put it in the rack, and they keep it all the way through their grades. I've never seen any of my colour belts.
Again, it's just a very different time. And again, I appreciate the time I had with my club and everything about it. But again, there's a very, very famous saying that none of the ancient masters trained the same way as the generation before. Times change, people change, and martial arts has to change as well. Yeah. And you just look at this situation of like I'm teaching virtually now, like we all are. I'm finding new ways to teach, and I could complain about it and go like, oh, this sucks, or we can't free spar, and we're not punching each other, how terrible it could be. Or I'm telling my guys, look, and going back to the story of Kyokushin, he was up in a wood on his own for years. And he trained on his own, and then he came down and beat every single one of the Japanese masters of the day, like from training on his own. So I say, look, guys, if you just train these skills, your flexibility, your leg conditioning, work on your push-ups and sit-ups, get strong. If you understand these movements, a lot of balance we do. I said, when you come back to the dojang, whenever that is, you're going to be so much better because your fundamentals will be tip-top. Because you'd have worked the technique. I know we're not working the timing and tactics so much, but you can work on certain things. And for me as an instructor, it's forced me to use these teaching muscles that I've never been able to use. So I'm looking at it in a positive way, saying that I'm becoming a better teacher because I'm limited by becoming a two-dimensional instructor instead of a three-dimensional instructor.
Yeah. So how have you found? You mentioned it's challenging and you've had to re-examine yourself. How have you found the transition from obviously working in a dojo to now taking your classes online, Gus?
Again, for the first, especially the first weeks, I was very nervous about doing it because I'd never taught like that before, and I felt very much like, I don't know, like Jane Fonda or Mr. Motivator or one of those people. I was like, oh, I'm just going to stand in front of the class, and we're talking now, we can all talk, but you get like 10, 12 people in a room, and you have to mute everyone. And what I realize is there's a feedback from the class of, you know, the aura of a person standing next to them, but also you hear them sweating, you hear them keyaping, you hear them working, right? I'm there and they're on mute and I'm watching these small boxes on my telly with these small thumbnails of people. And I'm going, are they working hard? Is this hard for them? Have they done this enough? I can't see the expressions in their faces. So the first month or so, we just had like one lesson a day, and it was just like for everyone. And I was just getting used to being this kind of instructor. But now the second month, we've opened up more classes. We're doing specific stretching classes, cardio classes, junior and senior. And for those people who are living with like a punch bag or a partner who can hold pads for them, we're doing like a pad drill class because, you know, as we know, it's nice to hit things. So we do that on a Friday night. So it is different. And again, I'm having the same frustrations as everyone else. But for me personally, I'm training more than I have in years because I've had the time. And my students who are working with me, I've seen huge improvements with them in 6 weeks because they've kept up their training to these very small minutiae, like you were saying earlier, spending 15 minutes on one thing. You guys have one steps, like self-defense techniques.
Yeah.
So obviously, how are you supposed to practice self-defense techniques without a partner? Right? So what I've done is I've reverse engineered we have like 1 to 5 white belt self-defense techniques. I've made a little kata form pattern of those one steps. And I said to my guys, I go, look, this is how the old masters would have remembered their fighting arts. They would have learned about 4 or 5 fighting principles or self-defense moves. And then they would have made a form into it, and they would have called it Basai, or they would have called it, Nahanshi Chodan, or whatever they call the form. And then they'd pass it down to all their students. Yeah. And I'm going, this is what we're doing right now. You've learned these self-defense techniques and done them millions of times in the dojang. Now we're going to reverse engineer them and make a little pattern out of it so you can remember and practice without a partner. So it's kind of going back to ancient ways of training.
So ancient way of teaching, isn't it? Ancient video recorder.
Yeah, that's it. That's the way it is. But again, so it's forcing you to do these other techniques. The other thing I've been doing is we've been doing applications on a belt. So practicing all our blocks and our kicks, holding onto a belt. And then, of course, I'd never trained like this before. And then some of my friends who were also teaching would come back to me and go, no, this is how they used to train in Okinawa. This is what they used to do. They used to have the Makawara board, tie a belt to it and do all their arm breaks and everything else. And I go, great. A very lucky one of my students made me a wooden dummy. So I'm starting to learn the wooden dummy Wing Chun form, which I've always wanted to learn. So it's just, again, for every door that closes, it's an opportunity that opens, the way I look at it.
So one of the challenges that we found for a number of our instructors that we talked to, who are very martial artists in TMMA live, is the technical aspect. So you're a techie person, Gus. How did you find getting your technical setup working and getting yourself online? How was that journey for you?
Again, I'm very lucky because one of the things that I did, again, we didn't talk about it, but basically I left as soon as I got my black belt. If we go back in time a bit, as soon as I got my black belt, my instructor had to retire to a knee injury, and at the time I had Osgood Slatters, didn't know what it was, but I had the spurt, and because I was doing the jumping, kicking, loads and loads of training, I'd wrecked my knees. And basically, I saw my instructor, and he could barely walk by the time he gave it in. And I looked at myself and I went, look, I'm 18. Do I really want to be like that?
How old was he, Gus? Does that have interest? How old was he?
Ooh, good question. He wasn't that old. He was in his late 30s, maybe. I don't know. Yeah. Again, we come back from a time, I didn't even know my instructor's home number. We just called him Sabanim. Like that was it, Like we come from a very respectful time where it was like Sabanim, like that's you never call him Chris or anything else like that. A total respect for him. And there wasn't this sort of social media thing of like we knew where he lived or anything. So when he retired, he was gone. And I remember being devastated and gone, like, well, I had an injury and I just didn't think I was going to learn from another instructor. Again, like I told you, when I started, the class was very new. So the person who took over was only about a year ahead of me. So there wasn't much that they could teach me in the club. And again, I was getting into 18, growing up, going to university. And when I went to university, I studied music and media. So one of the things that I did was I became a music promoter. So I did recordings and I ran my own business. So I learned how to do Photoshop, video editing, running my own website. I learned all that while I was in university, and I carried that on for the next 5 years before I came back to Tang Soo. So when I started teaching, when I came back, about 5 years I took off. When I came back and 5 years later I started teaching, 2010 this was, I already had some experience of making posters and and doing my own thing. So I already had here in my house, I had like a microphone for recording. I've got a laptop. I've got a video camera. I've got lights. So I was very lucky that I had all that stuff from my other sort of endeavors. Like, so for my club, I make all my own videos. I make my own websites. I make all my own images. I do it all myself because I know how much it would cost me to pay someone else to do it.
Yeah.
So I'm very lucky that it's, again, going back to the ancient warriors, the samurais would learn swordplay during the day, and then they'd learn like calligraphy in the night, and it was like their balance. So I call my editing of videos and sort of making posters and things like that, that's my yin yang to my training. The training is very intense, but then I sit down on my computer for hours and edit videos and things, and it's a nice sort of balance. So I was very lucky in that aspect.
Perfect skill set in this particular environment, isn't it?
Again, like years ago, people would say like, "Why are you messing around, like learning on Photoshop and things like that?" And now it's the skill to have. So I feel very lucky that I could do everything myself.
So just talk us through. So I mean, a lot of our listeners may not know Tang Soo. You being our first Tang Soo guest, just give us a little bit of history of Tang Soo. And its origins. Again,
like I learn stuff all the time. I find the history fascinating from Korea. So I'll sum up what I know about it, and I'm sure people will correct me. So I'm not an expert in this. This is just what I know and what I believe. And it sounds like a good story. This is what I would like to happen in my lifetime. I would like there to be a story of the history of Tang Soo and Taekwondo, a historical film, like they did for Ip Man, like they did for The Fighter in the Wind Kyokushin story. I think this would be a good story because, as you know, in Korea, there was a Japanese occupation from the sort of turn of the century to 1940. And then what had happened is the masters had been hiding in China. They came back to teach the art. They started off, as I believe, calling it Hua Sudo. Our Grandmaster Huang Qi started teaching this style called Hua Sudo, which was Chinese. And everyone had been like a generation of Japanese indoctrination. They wouldn't accept the Chinese style. So he'd obviously been learning in China all this time. So he then learnt Japanese karate, Shotokan, and mixed the two together and gave us, Mudokwan, Subakdo, Tang Soo, all these arts, Taekyon, which is, I think, the original art of Korea. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but it looks like Korean capoeira, like all kicks.
It's like a dance, isn't it? Yeah,
it's great. So that's where it comes. Like the way I describe it is it's like Japanese Tang Soo is Japanese karate mixed with the art of Taekyon. So in 1945, 46, through that era, Tang Soo was the biggest thing in Korea, and there were many schools, but the Mudokwan school taught by Grandmaster Huang Qi was the largest. And my grandmaster from the World Tang Soo Association, which is my Tang Soo Association, Jae Sho Shin, trained under him. And then what happened in the late 50s, early 60s, they started to go, right, Korea has been decimated, all its culture has been decimated. We need to have a national sport. So there was a general, the general of Taekwondo, and he said that we're going to call it Taekwondo. So what happened then was Tang Soo continued, but it became like two things. One thing, it either got amalgamated into Taekwondo. So a lot of the Taekwondo grandmasters originally did Tang Soo or Mudokwan. But they decided to stay in Korea. And there are some Tang Soo schools I've heard in Korea. But as far as I know, and the romantic story that I know is that everyone who wanted to teach Tang Soo left Korea. So that's why my instructor's instructor, Tom Mung Kim, his instructor, was in the small Welsh town of Cwmbran in the 70s teaching Tang Soo. And he taught my instructor who taught me. So that is the main difference between Tang Soo is that the Korea wanted a national sport, like cricket is the national sport of England and so on. So they wanted to make more of a sport, more about the competition, and more about like let's show this world where Tang Soo I've always felt is the traditional side, which is we do have competitions, but like in my style, we have like a competition like twice a year. It's not so much about competition. So I always tell my students that if you're looking for competition, if you want to compete all the time, then you want to be doing judo or taekwondo or kickboxing or some art where they have lots of competitions that you can do. Whereas our dojang motto, as you walk in, says, master the enemy within and all others cease to be. So my mantra has always been, I've been in competition with myself. I believe that Tang Soo is you're trying to improve yourself. And it comes back to that word of jitsu and do. Jitsu means to fight and do means way of life. I believe Tang Soo is a way of life where I'm saying like what I teach is like 5% self-defense and 95% self-preservation. I want you to all have a wonderful life by what I was saying earlier, dealing with adversity, getting punched in the face in the dojang, and then you go through life and you go, do you know what? Nothing's as bad as that time, you know, that black belt punched me in the face in class. Like I could deal with anything, you know, or like, you know, they get an injury. You know, often my students, they'll do the jump spinning kicks and be fine, and then they'll trip over doing something really basic and they're out for 6 months. But they had to rehab and get through that injury and come back, and they dealt with that adversity. And then they come back a better martial art, better person. So it's all about, like we were talking earlier, the character building. And again, I'm not saying Taekwondo or other sports doesn't have that. I'm just saying the methodology behind it is that sport-orientated martial arts are in competition. You know, you get beat, and then you come back and you go like I've done competitions, I've been beaten, I've gone like that, I'm going to get better. You know, but again, I've always seen it as more of a personal journey where everyone around you is there to make you better. Like you look to the guy to your left or the girl to your left and go, wow, she's good. And you don't think like, I'm going to fight her and beat her. You go like, I want to be like her. So when I was a kid, I used to look up to my instructor and have huge respect for him and go like, I want to be as good as my instructor. And I would always put myself going like, I need to kick as well as my instructor, or I need to do as many push-ups as my instructor, because it's a role model, because like Sabanim means lead by example. So this is why I try and do everything my students are doing. My students are training, I'm training. They're doing 50 push-ups, I'm doing 50 push-ups. You know, I'm doing everything that they're doing. I have a tagline that I give people. I go, look, if I could bottle the feeling that you get after a martial arts class, I'd be a millionaire. Like if you could sell it like a little shot, like they used to do those energy shots in the garage. If you could like give the feeling that you feel after getting through a hard class or a grading or a tournament or whatever it is, and bottle that feeling, you'd be a millionaire. I know it for sure.
So what do you see for the future for Heads of Valley Tang Soo Do, and also for Tang Soo Do generally within the UK and globally? Where do you see the future going?
I mean, there's a bunch of things. I mean, I always give myself goals. Again, if we run out of time, I'll just talk about one of my goals.
No.
Okay.
You keep going.
I
can edit it. Go.
No, again, feel free to edit it down. So I'll tell you the main one that I'd like to get across, especially in this time. Like I say, I was working in college for 12 years teaching music, and like a lot of people, martial arts was my hobby. And then it got to a point where my club became so big that it was too big for the leisure centre I was in. There was nowhere else to go. So a friend of mine sort of encouraged me to open up my own, you know, in a unit, start my own dojang. So last year in July, I left my job. I'd had the dojang open for 2 years already, but it was still very new and I wanted to do it full time. So the first thing was doing it full time. And just to tell you, just before the lockdown, I went from having 70 or 80 students in July of last year to now I have over 130 students. Well, I did have before the lockdown. So that was a huge goal, bringing my club, and my club was growing. My classes were we were doing new classes, like we were doing, you know, ladies kickboxing and fitness classes, and we were growing in that sense. So the gym was growing. You know, when I first moved to the dojang, I had 2 black belts, and now I have 9 black belts. So my black belts were growing. My partner, who also trained, she was about to get a second dan. So things were happening. You know, you guys often in your podcast talk about the martial arts show that obviously was cancelled now. But we were scheduled to go there, and Paul and Bob said this would be the first time Tang Soo Do has been at the martial arts show. Right. So again, like one of my goals is to get Tang Soo Do out there. I'm very sort of active on Instagram and YouTube. And again, I never want to be the sort of person who says, oh, look at me or look at Tang Soo Do. It's great. I'm just putting it out there and go, look, it's really helped out my life. It's really helped out my students' life. Like maybe it can help out your life. But again, I am with you, gentlemen, 100% of the way, where it doesn't matter about the art. It's all about the instructor and the club atmosphere. I think those are the most 2 important things. Like you were saying before about the social element, there should be this thing where you enjoy going to class. You're not scared about going to class, and your instructor should be firm and tough and shouldn't be giving you belts or anything like that. But they should also be approachable. Like they can talk to you about things, which again, maybe, 30, 20 years ago wasn't the case.
only approach was a stiff knuckle to the back of the head or the knee.
Again, like I remember our regional master. Like I was scared to even talk to him when I was, he was like the boss, and I was like I wouldn't even go near him. And again, I don't want that to be the case with my students. I want them to be able to talk to me about anything and approach to me. So again, talking about the new classes we did, one of the things that I took on was a kids class. I'd never done a kids class before. In fact, when I started teaching, I was like, what kid would want to learn from me? Like I just expected adults or teenagers to want to learn from me, no kids. So I set up a Tiny Tiger class, which I had zero experience in. And I just found that because I had the same maturity as the children there, that I got on quite well with them. So the Tiny Tiger class, again, like this is what I was talking about, the happiness thing earlier. It's like when I go to the Dojangers teach, I'm as excited as when I was a 13-year-old boy when I went there. Like that feeling, that excitable feeling never goes away if I'm teaching or training. Just never goes away. Like I'm always that excited about everything. You just ask any of my students or the people I train with, they go, "Wow, Gus is excited about this." I just don't lose it. I just love it. And I'm always challenging myself. Like so, I think it was yesterday. Yesterday I released do you know what Kictionary is?
No.
Kictionary?
No,
Go on. Enlighten us then, Gus.
I didn't invent this term. Basically, I'll tell you this quick story. This is just what I've been into. So one time my friend asked me how many kicks I knew, and I went, I don't know. I was like, maybe, 100 at a stretch. So then I'm a big nerd, so I tested it. So I wrote down all the kicks I knew and made this little video of 100 kicks. And then I put it out online and went, look, here's 100 kicks. Isn't this fun? 100 different kicks. And then someone showed me, you probably know the martial artist, Eric Jacobus. He's the guy who does the mocap for the Gods of War. He has a video on his channel where he does a 200 Kictionary. And then I was like, right, I want to do a 200 Kictionary. I was like, and again, I'm not saying I'm nearly as good a kicker as Eric Jacobus, but it was just like, that looks like fun. I did a kick of 100. Let's do 200. So I did a 200 video. Eric shared it. It was really fun. I became friends with him. And then obviously time goes by, and I was like, oh, I can't do it. So I released one the other day where it's 350 kicks, a Kictionary, and it's just me being excited, going, another new kick, let's go. So that's the kind of person I am. I'm always setting myself these challenges and going for it. Getting back to the Tiny Tiger thing of how I did it, what was happening was certain children were being brought to me that had autism and other needs that I couldn't address in a group class. And before, when I was teaching, I didn't have any time in the day. I was in work all day. I'd leave work, I'd run home, have lunch. You guys probably know this feeling, and then go straight to teach all night, and then go back and sleep, wake up, do the same thing. And I turned to my partner one day. I can't keep doing this. Like I'm dead. I'm not doing any training.
It's not sustainable, is it?
So what I realized, and again, I'm so happy to people like Gordon Bircham and other people who are out there who are telling people you could do this full time. He's one of the people who helped me realize that I could do it full time. So I did it full time, and then now I had this extra time. I could turn to these children who had these needs and go, look, they're not ready for a class right now, but I can offer private sessions and I can teach your child martial arts. So I taught myself how to communicate and how to get the best out of these children with autism. Started with one kid named Tom, worked with him for about a year. And now I did have, again, I keep saying I did have, I was up to 7 students who I was working with autism. And what was happening was they were not only becoming amazing martial artists, but their parents were saying they're different children. Like one lad, Daniel, he couldn't be in an assembly. He just couldn't talk. He couldn't be in there. And then he could be in there. Other boys were talking more. Other boys were doing this. And it was the same thing that I was saying, that martial arts can bring out the best in you. So just before the lockdown, I was invited to the local Monmouth stakeholders meeting where I had to talk in front of all these people who were experts in autism. And I sort of stood up and I went, well, I don't know anything about autism, but I do know about martial arts. So I stood up there and I played them a little video because I'd been filming the sessions for the parents to keep of how their children were progressing. We work on something, I'd film them. Here's them doing their one steps. Here's them doing their form. Here's them doing this. And I showed it to the people at the autism meeting going like, they're probably going to think like this is what I thought they were going to say. I thought they were going to say, yeah, he knows all about martial arts, but he doesn't know anything about autism, blah, blah, blah. But it was the complete opposite reaction I was expecting, where they all stood up and applauded and went, like they kind of looked at me and went, you fixed what we've been doing for 20 years. How can we mass market this? So just before the lockdown, I was in talks to how to develop my system of teaching to help disaffected people. So again, if I could only talk about one thing, my biggest goal moving forward is I believe that I can help anyone from any background with martial arts, not just become fighters or champions or get their black belt. That's not the
general life
thing.
skills.
But what we were talking about before, the transferable skills. And again, like there used to be a thing where you need to be male, you need to be fit, you need to be strong. And then that myth went away. And I think also now, because I have a dojang, because I have all the time in the world, I can give these students with these needs the time and energy they did. And one of the things about the lockdown was when it first happened, all my kids, especially with autism, disappeared. And the nice thing is now that I've become more confident online, I've been able to form new relationships with some of my students, not all of them, but some of my students with autism. And now they're learning through this really difficult medium of being on video. So
yes,
again, the power of martial arts is very strong.
So like yourself, Gus, I see it as an exciting opportunity, not doom and gloom. It's like, right, we're upskilled, so we're all better instructors now because we're teaching online. Technically, we're better, and actually now looking how to set our new syllabuses ready for getting back to business as the new normal, whatever that may be.
And I suppose the only difficulty with the virtual thing for obviously children with autism and stuff like that, you get some kids that get really engaged with it, I'd imagine, and you get some kids that will totally shy away from it.
And again, I at the moment, I just need to accept that. But I am looking forward to maybe when we go back to private one-to-one sessions. I mean, just before the lockdown, I was teaching private lessons where I put a line across the dojang and say, look, I'm going to stay on one side, you're going to stay on the other side. Set up a punch freestanding bag on one side, freestanding bag on the other side, and go, look, I can teach like this. But again, I think for some students, especially the ones with autism, they need to have me in the room, and I totally understand that. So when they're ready, we'll go for that.
Get back.
Yeah, no. So.
Most likely that'll be the first phase of getting back to normal. I should imagine having those one-to-one classes where you're not.
Well, again, I think it's an exciting time for martial arts because we've done two things. One is we've solved the problem of self-defense. We're now untouchable. That's a good thing, right? And the other thing is, as an advertising slogan, you've bought that as well, like get fit, otherwise you'll perish. So like
there's more. I mean, we were talking about this the other day. There's no more important time in our history to be fit and healthy,
and also a strong mind, a strong immune system, and dealing with adversity. A lot of people have been having anxiety attacks, and one of the things that I teach everyone on their first lesson is, look, this is how you breathe properly. We do a lot of yoga and meditation and qigong, and it's how to relax and deal with these stressful situations. Again, I just think martial arts has such an answer to every problem. Again, it's going to be great advertising ideas for whatever the future holds.
Okay then, cool. Right then, Gus, it's an absolute pleasure having you on. Like I say, congratulations, you're our first Tang Soo instructor that we've had on.
Thank
you. There's a milestone.
Yeah. Yes, appreciate it.
And it's been a great insight into your martial arts. So thank you very much.
No problem.
Jackson, before we go, you've got to ask the last question. What's the last question we always ask?
Yeah, I almost forgot. So, what would you, Gus, given the position that you're in now, what advice would you give to a younger you?
I give myself two bits of advice. One is savor the time more, because my journey from white belt to black belt seems like a blur now, and I would do anything to be just a fly on the wall and watch those classes. So again, I did appreciate it at the time, obviously, but I would savor the moment. Like, one of the things I do with my students all the time, every time they get a new belt, take a photo. Every time we're grading, we film the classes and go like, this is what the classes were like in May of blah, blah, blah year. And sometimes my students get sick of it. I go, look, you guys, like me, I have no pictures of my class together as a group. I have no pictures of my class training. I would savor those moments, because it goes by so quick. And the other thing I kind of regret is, my knees were bad, and I wish we had the access that we have now, where someone could have gone, you could have done, Kung Fu for 4 years. Does that make sense? That's not going to kill your knees. But again, I was so I love Tang Soo and I love this, and I did do other styles at the time, but it was kind of like I never found that instructor connection like you would now.
Yeah.
So again, I feel very lucky to my students. I tell them all the time, I go try another style. You do what you love. I've trained in lots of styles, and Tang Soo is just the one I love the most.
One that you love, yeah.
Yeah, and again, it's the same for everyone else. But it's like the first car you get. You need to drive some other cars to go, this is the car for me, or the job, or whatever. You need to go out there and explore it. So I wish younger me had been exposed to martial arts like people are today. I think that would have been interesting. When I had my knee injury, it would have been nice to know that there were styles out there that wouldn't put pressure on my knee, like Tang Soo. I mean, the great thing is that I've learned how to overcome that coming back, and I teach a lot of people how to rehab knees and stay strong and stay safe. That's one of the things I've pushed. But again, I wish I had that information at 18.
And knowledge is great, isn't it?
Yeah, totally, 100%.
Cool.
Okay,
Okay, thanks very much,
Thank you
Gus.
very much. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me on, boys. I really appreciate it. Take care.